What do I say? How do I start? Let's just listen to Ria bringing the drinks up the stairs in complete stillness. And see this whole sweet action performed within unchanging one. Of all the spiritual exercises I've ever learnt about or practiced, I'm not sure if anything is really of more benefit than simply looking at the sky. And this morning was a most wonderful example of that, at least for those of you that were up early enough to see the wonderful clear stars. Absolutely breathtaking. And one of the blessings of living the way I do is this early morning walk up to the church, up from the lights of the town. And usually it's dark enough up there to get a clear, or a fairly clear view of the stars. And I spend a few minutes there before 5 o'clock, just leaning backwards over the rail, looking up at the stars. And I won't attempt to describe to you what it means to me. Well, I won't attempt to put names on it and say what it is that I find. Because I think we've all got to find it for ourselves. I think all I can do is just encourage you to look. The more we can look into the sky, the more it will nourish us with the sense of the infinite. And of course, not everybody wants that. Some people really shrink away from the infinite. But I'm not really speaking to those, because all of us here, I think, to some extent, have that yearning in our hearts. You were talking of this yesterday, Krish, weren't you? This yearning for what? Well, for the stars, I wouldn't say, maybe there's a connection, maybe there isn't, but maybe there is. For me, there is. Soon after I started to meditate, I remember I used to do more public speaking then. I remember describing meditation as finding one's own inner starlight. That's what it meant to me in the early days. It still does, really, except even more so, even beyond the stars now. But to look up at that, what happens to John Butler when I lie on my back, look up at the stars? What happens to this mortal me and his little personal worries? Sort of absorbed, isn't it? Taken up. Accepted. I think that's important. There's total allowance, isn't there? There's no judgment at all. Comfort. The sense of I am with you. The sense of continuity. You can trust yourself. And to a lesser extent, And every time, as we were walking down the path this morning, there was a lovely rose tint to the sky, wasn't there? Extraordinary, isn't it, that every day since the world began, as far as we know, it's never the same sky, is it? It's always different. Extraordinary, isn't it? How can that be? Most of us these days need practice to look at the sky. We're not used to it, are we, living the life we do? So I do seriously recommend it to you. The more you can just look out of the window at the sky, I'm sure you'll find much benefit from it. Even just now, I don't get a direct view of the sky, but just on the wall over there, there's sunlight reflected on the wall, and not really knowing quite what to say next, I look at that sunlight, and I'm sort of reassured that this infinite comfort is there, and all I have to do is just remain as connected as I can to it, and this meeting will go well. That's really the only thing I need to do, isn't it? It's certainly not anything that comes from here. Except just to bring you back again to what I felt this morning, and this wonderful process that I find myself in now, which is, now that I'm old, the impediment, as it were, the that which complicates it is, thank God, dying out. And you see what's left. This isn't the interesting bit. It's more than interesting, it's actually thrilling. Because the less I am this, the more it's this. It really is less me, more God. And those stars this morning were so wonderful reassurance that that is how it actually is. And it's absolutely without fear or any apprehension whatsoever. It's total reassurance, total comfort, total, what did I say? Did I really say accept? A total allowance, you know. Come unto me, beloved. And looking back on my life, I see the only problem with my life is that I've sort of hung on to this separate identity that we call our personality, the John, the Christine, the Daniela, the Chris, the Phil, and try to sort of, do what we feel we have to do in this life. We don't know any better, really. That's what we do. It's it's what we call life. But actually, it's life with a very small L indeed. The real life is this. It's so obvious. So simple. Why don't we see it? But we don't. And this is, in this mysterious way, is presumably what we're here for, to live this life of absence from this glory and try as best we can to reach in this direction and hopefully, God willing, draw closer to it. We had such a sweet conversation last night. There were 3 people came from Manchester, from a rather intellectual group of people based on Buddhism. Very nice people I'd known, but these 3 I hadn't met before. And after we'd meditated, we just sat in a corner and just exchanged a few words. And of course started off with the usual few questions about what is truth. And I fumbled to try and, how can one put such a question into words? How can we reduce such a concept, whatever we mean by truth, into words? You put something into words and immediately it's divided, isn't it? It's chopped into this and not that. I'm really a bit nervous of words these days, especially descriptive words. And then I'm not quite sure how it continued as we walked down the church path. And somehow with that rather discomfort, it just melted into such sweet and simple love. I held the lady's hand as we walked down the church path, and somehow that seemed to answer all questions and just took us out of this struggling to what is truth sort of level of thinking into just that sweet touch. Put us in touch with another reality, different level of reality. I suppose that's when we look at the stars, that's just what happens. We're put in touch, aren't we? Put in touch with a higher reality. Words fail us, and yet it's undeniable, isn't it? It's so powerful, it rather sweeps all else aside. It sweeps aside questions and doubts and anything. How do you describe the wonder? Makes me think one of the old hymns, church hymns, goes, lost in wonder, love and praise. It's about it, isn't it? And somehow the whole thinking world was forgotten about it, and it sort of fades out of the picture. It's been quite an extraordinary few days. Two days ago, there were two sweet young men. One was a postgrad student of psychology, the other was a practicing psychologist. And then another visitor came who's also a student of psychology. Extraordinary. 3 psychologists. What on earth do you come here for? But somehow, once again, these 2 men, they left yesterday morning, just in, again, this sweetness of love just swept all that aside, melted away, melted into tears. I don't suppose I could possibly have. Well, I know I couldn't have spoken like this years ago because I didn't have the confidence. I was too shy of even venturing to speak in public about what comes more naturally to me now. I suppose that's how it is with most of us, isn't it? Once you get into these deep feelings, practice, practice, practice. 30 years ago, I was in Africa, blessed to spend quite some time in the deserts, sleeping under those stars. Unforgettable. Yet then I described it. It's written, a description in the book I wrote about it called Mystic Yearning. It was a yearning. I had that yearning in me then, this yearning for this, for what? For love, but more than love, more than human love. I couldn't, of course it's ungraspable, isn't it? We can't express it. That's why I suppose why we have this perpetual yearning, because it's inexpressible. It's a yearning for what's beyond expression, at least our human expression. But now, unbelievably, I feel it with me more and more now. Not quite all the time, but certainly most of the time. It's wonderful. I can't tell you how wonderful it is, this sense of dying out of limitation. It's unbelievable, it really is. It brings tears to my eyes to talk about it. You just melt away, just melt into love. And that's all there is. That's what it's all about. And this whole world is that we've just fallen away from it. But step by step, we can be quite sure we are being drawn back. Because it's just like a great big magnet in the sky, to which our little childish magnet is reaching out, you see. And sooner or later this great big "Come unto me, beloved," as Jesus says, irresistibly draws this little yearning me closer and closer and closer. And please God, one day for all of us, maybe the little one just melts into the big one, and we find out what it's all for, what all our struggles have been about. And why the world is as it is. It all becomes clear and understandable. It's revealed. To each of us in our own unique way. Revelation. Well, dear friends, as usual, you see, I've really got nothing much to say, so if any of you would like to prompt me with a question or some comment, then it gives me, it's very helpful to me. Otherwise, I shall have some more tea. Well, I question also this, you use the word leap. I don't think I've ever made it any leaps, dear. I don't think it's all happened in spite of myself, really, dear. I'm not sure I've done anything very much. I don't think I've ever had any leaps or particularly sudden enlightenments. You see, you only got to look at our physical shapes. We're all different, aren't we? We all think differently. And there's another comment I'd make. Dear, you ask me what I think. Well, as I'm beginning to say quite often these days, I won't answer you because I don't trust my thoughts, dear, or anybody else's. I mean, thoughts seem rather like gurgles in the tummy, really, now. In fact, this whole thing of the mind, I'm beginning to see now as it's just like your tummy, only it's just a sort of mental tummy just digesting all the sort of things that are floating about in the atmosphere these days. And I'm rather losing interest in it all now, including these things we call thoughts, which are, what are they? Aren't they just like the rumblings of the mind? The gurgles and little, things that tummy does, just on a mental scale. I don't know what it is, my dear. How should I know? But it is fun and it's interesting. It's very attractive to enter into these sort of mental games, isn't it? And questions and that. We could spend the whole morning, playing around here. But I'm going to just try to bring you back to being present, you see. Just like that good man Eckhart Tolle keeps telling us. Being present, you see. And immediately that opens up this other reality, doesn't it? This silence, this space, this inner sky, as it were. It's unbelievably simple, isn't it, once you get the knack? That beyond this mentality, where most of us live for most of our lives, there's this complete availability of, this is where my laughter comes from, you see. This it's not so much funny, it's just this bubbling release. Those of you that have read my book, Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment, might remember that on the very first page, I describe how it is in the spring, when the grass grows, and it's time to let the cows out of winter quarters. They've spent the whole winter, haven't they, shut in their barns, living on conserved food. And then the land dries out, and the grass grows and the sun shines, and it's time to let them out to graze again. And so the gates are opened, the chains are taken off, and what do the cows do? They just stand there blinking. They won't go, will they? It happens every year with every cow. And then after a while, there's always one who's a bit more curious than the other, take a nervous step. Another step, the others just watch. And eventually she'll step out. What's all this? And suddenly get the message, and off she goes. And then one by one the others follow. Talk about laughter, that's laughter, dear, isn't it? You can see the cows kicking their heels with joy, suddenly start galloping around. Oh dear, isn't that exactly what it is? We're just the same, aren't we? We're sort of hesitant, we won't go. But, we say. That's just what the cows say, but. Yes, I know we can look at the stars and intellectualize about them. I suppose that's why it's an individual journey, isn't it? Who can generalize about it for everyone? Well, that's just how it is, my dears, isn't it? Like, you don't always see the stars, do we? I mean, how often do we get a night like last night? Often it's just day after day of overcast skies. Inspiration. I love the words from the Bible. They that wait upon the Lord. We are required to present ourselves an acceptable sacrifice. Perhaps that's all we can do, is just present ourselves, and sometimes we can't even do that. But just turn in that direction, if we remember. That's why discipline is so helpful. It just pulls us through those many occasions when we don't want to do it. When everything in us is saying, oh, I don't want to, I'm too tired, I'm too busy. It's so helpful if at some point in our progress we can put it first, make it just a priority. We don't usually miss our breakfast, do we?